Hello and welcome to MLW Confusion. I'm your host Rob Cameron, bringing you all that you may or may not need to know about Major League Wrestling and its television programming. This week, we are sitting down with Augustus Draven. He's a member of SCW Pro's Chosen, and has had his fingers in a handful of major storylines within SCW Pro. We're going to talk to him about his journey into the realm of professional wrestling. Talk quite a bit too about some old school wrestling. I like not blowing smoke because I haven't told him this yet, but like if there ever comes a time like I do a kind of like a round table discussion about professional wrestling, especially older professional wrestling, like I totally want him to show up and drop some knowledge on us, because like we could have just talked old wrestling the entire time, but like that was not the full reason I had him on the show. But like it's really cool talking to him, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation we had as well. But first, of course, let's get the news in, shall we? MLW officials have allegedly been meeting with Don King regarding the Beaumaye Fight Club, and specifically the firing of Alex Kane. Obviously, at One Shot, Eric Bischoff fired him, and evidently there's like some sort of like no take-back clause. So like whatever Bischoff does is official, and they can't reverse it for any reason, storyline purposes wise. So I guess this means we are going to bring out the shambling corpse of Don King to mutter Beaumaye and, just shout out some random BS. But whatever, man. Hey, at least they're still acknowledging some continuity there, because I get skeptical whenever they bring up Don King in MLW, and, well, hey, at least he's still bankrolling the Beaumayes, huh? Still wheeling and dealing. It has also been announced that at Kings of Colosseum, Donovan Dijak will battle Kenta. Also at One Shot, this is the kind of the follow-up. Previously, Dijak has basically called out the entire MLW roster, Kenta being one of those names. Dijak came by after Kenta's last match and laid him out, and it looks like we are finally going to get some one-on-one action for that. Of course, Kings of Colosseum is January 11th at the NYTEX Sports Center in North Richland, Texas, North Richland Hills, Texas. So be sure to check that out if you're in the area live. If not, of course, you can catch that on YouTube. Some more matches have been announced or further clarified, the first of which is Filthy Tom Lawler battles Minoru Suzuki of Country Unit. This should be a fun battle. Suzuki's kind of been a monster since his re-debut to MLW, and even more so with Contra, racking up a tag team championship victory, and has been for the most part like almost undefeated. Obviously, he's taken a couple of key losses, most notably to Satoshi Kojima. But anything Tom Lawler does, almost anything Tom Lawler does, I'm going to enjoy, and this match sounds like a lot of fun on paper, so I am down for it. We just have to remember that Minoru Suzuki gets turned on by chops, so maybe Tom should not chop him. Or do it, and it'll be extra kinky. They don't call him filthy for nothing. It has also been announced that the challenge match that they previously referenced at Lucha Apocalypto, Mystico versus Barbaro Cavernario, that is now going to be a 2 out of 3 falls match, which honestly is standard for Lucha Libre, a bit more rare on the American scene, but most big title matches in Mexico is 2 out of 3 falls, especially when the title is involved. So going back and getting a little bit traditional for that match for the title. And last but not least, also announced for the Kings of Colosseum tapings, we have a Texas Tornado match as the Andersons look to battle Paul London and Paul Walter Hauser. The Andersons, by proxy the Rogue Horsemen, ran afoul of Paul Walter Hauser because Paul London was the trainer of Paul Walter Hauser, and obviously the Horsemen came together over the broken corpse of Paul London, and had taken some time to run London down verbally as well later on in the hallways. So we'll see how this goes for old Stingray, because they actually had a guy that specialized in street fighting, and they couldn't win that match. I'm not sure what we're going to do in a wild and woolly match with a man who's a touch older and a touch slower. Not not to put down London too terribly much. Obviously, he's got a wealth of experience to draw from, but I just don't see this turning out much better for old Stingray. All right, let's take a brief pause for the cause. Get yourself an energy drink, a coffee machine, some WWE merch, etc., etc., etc. I'll be back with Augustus Draven, and we'll be back with that un momento. Hey, folks. MLW Confusion's become a veritable hub of shopping and treats and all that sort of good stuff. Whether you need a sugar-free alternative to energy drinks in the form of Raise Energy, or maybe even, top-of-the-line ice makers, coffee machines, and other household appliances, or, well, let's go crazy, and you can even get WWE licensed apparel all through my links section. All you got to do is wander down to the descriptor of this week's episode, check out the various links, click on them, and go shopping like you normally would. Heck, it's no difference. You just came in and just said Rob sent you. And that way, you can get the things you need, maybe even at a discount, and the podcast gets a kickback as well. So be sure to check out those links. Thank you very much for listening. Back to the show. All right, we are back. MLW Confusion. With me in the studio, or at least when we taped in the studio, is independent wrestler, member of The Chosen. He is the anti-saint. He is, dare I even say, emo Braveheart? ? Augustus Draven. Augustus, how are you doing this evening, man?
Hey, I'm doing good. Good. Very happy and grateful to be here.
I will try to keep the emo Braveheart things to a low bit, because Lord knows that's not the biggest term of endearment, at least from the SCW pro crowd. Though I will note that the Wizard and I, at Season's Beatings, try to turn that into a positive of Braveheart's going to kill you.
Okay.
The chant didn't catch on, but we tried.
Well, you just never know what's going to hit, right? Because that was just a one-off line that Knight Wagner threw out on commentary in February. It was a match with Crotch in February. It was just a one-off line. Him and Regal say a lot every show, right? And the crowd just took to it. They chanted it really loud that night. And here we are 10 months later, and they chant it pretty loud every show. And it's not just like, oh, those three guys over there. You know what I mean? It's a good portion of the crowd, good percentage of the crowd. It even followed me to Iowa City. So the first few months that was a thing. Iowa City didn't chant it at all. And now when we go there, when we run shows at Wildwood, I get the emo Braveheart chants there. So it just shows that you really do never know what's going to hit and what's going to stick.
Oh, I agree. And as I've said on this podcast numerous times, I am a proud supporter of SCW Pro, and I go to most of the shows. I will not say all of them, but the first emo Braveheart, it killed me the first time, and then it's it blows my mind that it's still just going on. And I think you can get rid of this idea as soon as I say it or whatever, but you should do the old old Southern Indies, Memphis style, and have emo Braveheart merch that you hate to see, have someone else sell it for you, and be little Cesaro section-esque signs, and then
that's a great idea.
And people and sell or stickers have for $1, and then when people are holding them up and give a shout out to you, you can flip out, and I don't know if you want to go so far as to tear them up, but you can flip out, and in addition to doing that's not my name thing. But
that's funny. That's good stuff. I should try it. Hey, I could use all the help I can get, right? So that's definitely something I'll keep in mind.
All right. So we wouldn't dwell on that terribly long. So we'll move along to maybe the very beginning. We'll say, what got you interested in the wacky world of professional wrestling?
I was just a kid flipping through channels, and wrestling just happened to be on, and it just grabbed my attention, and I never stopped. It's just that simple. It's just go back to what we were just saying. You never know what's going to hit. You never know what's going to stick. Kids, if you've ever been around kids, you don't need to have your own kid to have been around kids, and just, kids like what they like. You know what I mean? No rhyme or reason, right? Some kids like Transformers, right? Some like sports. Some get really into music really early. Some get into goofy cartoons. that are American style, some get into anime. You just never know. And then it goes in phases too, right? So you just never know. Oh, this kid is really into cartoons for a couple years and then just drops it, right? And just for whatever reason, I saw it was the love at first sight. I never stopped watching. I came close a couple of times, once as a kid and once in adulthood, but I've never stopped. So it's just hard to explain, but we like what we like.
Were you a WWE or we'll just go age in general? Like, were you a WWE/F guy or were you a WCW guy?
So it was WWF at first, but then WCW was probably just a year out. So by the time I hit 1 year as a pro wrestling fan, WCW was in the mix as well.
But like, I was a guy who watch like the first hour of Nitro and then flip it over to Raw, and then I catch like SmackDown, and then like Saturday night, or didn't watch much of Thunder for whatever reason, but like yeah, I had like my preferences, but I didn't stop. Like, I didn't just stop.
Yeah, that was the best when you were able to go between shows at the same time, when there's wrestling on at the same time, especially in pre-digital age. That was the best.
I agree, and they got like, and then you took it like a step farther, and they got like the tape traders in. Like, I was never old enough to be a proper tape trader, but I knew a guy who taped all the pay-per-views, like both WCW, WWF. Like, I don't know how much money he probably spent on pay-per-views, but he a couple times a year, like he'd let us come over and just like peruse his collection, and you get like 2 or 3 pay-per-views, and he was my wrestling library. But it's not about me, it's about you. I'm just going off into La La Land. But who were some of the workers that really kind of drew you into the product, whether it's WCW or WWF?
Well, my favorite wrestler of all time is Bret the Hitman Hart. So that would be he was the one who was on when I was flipping through, and then I stuck with him. Like, that's my number one with a bullet, right? My 3 favorite wrestlers of all time are Bret Hart, AJ Styles, and CM Punk. So that kind of gives you an idea of my fandom. So it would have been Bret Hart, Bret and Owen. Too Cold Scorpio really drew my attention. Brian Pillman and Steve Austin really were, I found, to be very entertaining. I loved Harlem Heat when I first saw them. Boy, who were some of the? And then I remember, after a little while, so Bret Hart's my favorite wrestler of all time. My favorite wrestling promotion of all time is the original ECW. The original ECW really captured my imagination and my fandom. Even for years after they closed, right? Just the whole different presentation style just really appealed to me. A product of the time, but we're all products of our time, right? So I think that's like a good sampling. But like, I always loved Bret Hart. I always loved, as a kid, children don't care about work rate, right? But when I look back on it, I look back on his stuff, and it's like, well, was I a fan? And it's like, well, no, that's why he's one of the best of all time, is he was able to combine the performance and the work rate, right? As well as anyone ever, I would say better than anyone that's ever done it. And those still to this day are the ones who really are able to really draw me in. The ones who their stuff looks good, it's snug, it's believable, but then they're not just running a cooperative, aggressive parkour gymnastics routine out there, right? They're still leaning into the performance aspect of it. And so, like, when I look back, like, I can still rifle off, 10, 20 Bret Hart matches that I just love. Right. So that would be, did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
I'm the one ranting now, right? I'm the one going off in the La La Land.
Well, so since you're the guest, like, this is the time for you to take all the spotlight. I half joke that my best episodes are where the guest just gets to go off on their tangents to tell their stories, and then I try to like hide in the background, and then like I say this in front of the wife, and she asks me when I'm going to start. Oh, bum bum bum. But no, I really, like a lot of wrestling fans appreciate Bret Hart's work, and like for me, like he made it feel. I hate saying it, he made it feel real, but everything he did like made sense in context. Like he may not like he understood the performance while like not necessarily being prone to like we'll say like the 1980 style histrionics of professional wrestling. Like he wasn't loud, bombastic, but like he knew how to get you hooked, and sometimes like he would do the little things that like maybe now we'd call it work rate a bit, but like no one was hitting the turnbuckles like he was, like that whole front turnbuckle hit. And and I think but he's one of the early popularizers of the 5 moves of doom, so you kind of knew when that hook was coming, and so when someone got out, it was that much more of a gut punch. But you also have throughout like a batch of interesting names. Like I at a certain level, I don't think Harlem Heat quite gets the love they deserve. Like everyone knows what loves Booker T, and he's a verifiable legend on his own, but like I don't think Harlem Heat get the love that they do. And like Lord knows that Scorpio is like always just under everyone's radar, and despite bringing like, and people forget like how big he actually was, like physically big, how physically big he was, and still pulling off some of those, the shooting star press and the moonsault leg drops, and whichever variation of the moonsault he was called, the tumbleweed, that was that I'm blanking on at the moment.
And dropping the bomb. Yeah, Scorpio is a
Yeah,
true heavyweight. He was not a
yeah,
cruiserweight. He was a true heavyweight. He didn't look. If you just go back and watch his stuff, he doesn't look small, right? So he was out there, in both WCW. Well, he hit all three, right? WWF,
yeah.
WCW, and ECW. He never is dwarfed by anyone, right? Now they didn't always have him working with a Sid Vicious or a Kevin Nash or a Diesel, right? But back in those days, there weren't as many small guys, right? And he never, it'd be like if you go back and look at when Eddie Guerrero worked with like Brock Lesnar or The Rock or even Ric Flair. You go back and look at those matches, just still, you're like, man, Eddie looks so small compared to these guys, right? But Scorpio, it was never that way. He always looked the same size or as big or bigger than pretty much anyone he was in the ring with.
Yeah, he was never. Yeah, as you said, he was a true heavyweight. He was never like someone they classified like officially as a light heavyweight or cruiserweight. Though he obviously worked that style. Even with some like guys we maybe now think of, I guess junior heavyweight would be a better terminology for it. But like the classics he put on with Chris Benoit is like one of the first things I always think of was Scorpio, because I personally missed a lot of ECW until like 1999, 2000, when they finally got the TNN deal. So like my experience with Scorpio, unfortunately for the most part, was like 1993 WCW, and missed like, I guess you call some of his heyday stuff outside of like again his matches with Chris Benoit in WCW, and then his tag team with Marcus Alexander Bagwell, tag team specialist there. But no, and then of course like I'm always a Pillman mark, like one way or another too, and I think it's like the entire almost the list of everyone you kind of threw out there. Though I will have to ask, with being a Pillman mark, were you a bigger fan of Flying Brian or the Loose Cannon?
So when I prefer the loose cannon. I think the loose cannon for me is maybe the greatest character in the history of professional wrestling. So I mean, it's probably the one I'm the most entertained by pure character work. But it's a tale of two careers, right? Because he was a no character, uh, junior heavyweight mechanic, right? Having his historical series of matches with Jushin Thunder Liger and being in one of the best tag teams of the early 90s with Steve Austin. And it was all between the ropes work. And then after his car accident, when he could barely work is when he did his best character work, right? So if I had to pick between the two, I would pick, Loose Cannon Brian Pillman, but I would pick Loose Cannon Brian Pillman in a list of many things, right?
He's one of my what ifs. Like he really just started kind of like hit his stride career wise, and then he had the car accident which shattered his ankle, and he was like he really should have just retired. Like I mean, medically speaking, he should have retired after that, because he was like it never did heal right, and they had to fuse it if I remember correctly. Like, but yeah, the loose cannon work. Yeah, it was amazing. And if I just think he could have had like some of like the flying Brian work rate with the loose cannon persona, like there's a good possibility we could thinking like we would not know what a Stone Cold Steve Austin is. We would just be talking about Brian F and Pillman.
Well, they would have paralleled each other, right? Because the Stone Cold Steve Austin proved that you didn't need the work rate, right? You go back and you look at Stone Cold Steve Austin's matches, much like you go back and look at matches from the 80s. When the crowd is going absolutely nuts for every little thing you do, you don't need a lot of work rate. And Pillman, I would just respectfully disagree and say he didn't need to retire. He just needed to stay alive because it's a work and you can work around anything. And Stone Cold Steve Austin's prime run shows that you can work around anything. And if he would have been able to be around after Mania 14, when the bubble just, when pro wrestling became pop culture, he would just be paralleled. He would be paralleled with Rock and Austin and Triple H and all of them if he would have been allowed to do his character work, because there's a case to be made. They launched the Attitude Era, right? Could you not say the Attitude Era began with Pillman's Got a Gun? But so like, just as if he would just been alive to just keep going, and then who knows if he would have evolved, right? Because he didn't even need to, right? But maybe he would have wanted to and whatnot. But when you have that character work, a character that creates emotional investment makes the suspension of disbelief easier, and that's what it's all about, is a suspension of disbelief, and emotional investment. And Pillman had that. He had the smart marks. He had the ECW arena in the palm of his hand, right? Like, just imagine what he would have been able to do with the biggest concentration of common fans that the wrestling business ever had or ever will have. It would have been something. Salivating just thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, again, just as you put out, like work rate didn't quite matter as much. And like, let's face it, Austin, was not quite the same after the broken neck. But even then, he was kind of a meat and potatoes brawler to begin with. He was his five stars were just more based on the drama of the match, even going back in the day. So,
Oh yeah,
fair point. A fair point. And like, and especially with some of the wackiness. And I don't mean, when I say wacky, I don't necessarily mean lighthearted, but like some of just like how crash TV, I think is the term that they've used. Some of that work rate. Yeah, you're right. Some of the work rate you could get around it, or there was just enough like craziness, chaos surrounding it. Like I think he would have made it work regardless. I'm not gonna argue that at that point whatsoever, because like, as you said, he's probably one of the like those 5 bullet point moments of what we would call the genesis of the Attitude Era. And it's crazy to think that we're like, functionally speaking, we only got to see him like in full form as the loose cannon for maybe like a year, 18 months, like tops, like in between his release from
18 months tops.
Like,
he was gone before the Montreal Screwjob. Right, it was the day of the first Hell in a Cell, or the night before, technically, is when he passed. Right, so like, he wasn't even around for the scratch logo. So like, so technically he did all that before the designation of Attitude. So that's wild. Just like, what would Russo and Ferrara with Vince as their filter working with Brian Pillman, right? Like, I think it's not unreasonable to think it would have been akin creatively or entertainment wise to anything we saw from Rock or Austin or Triple H or Foley or Kane or Taker. Doesn't mean he would have been a cultural icon, printing money, type deal. But I think the entertainment value for the time would have been the definition of top tier.
As I said, like, it just kind of like blows my mind how fast it went. Every now and again, it's like one of those like little things like I do for like my nerd stuff, where I'm just like, I want to see X, Y, and Z, or I want to know the stats for X, Y, Z, and like Pillman pops up every now and again, and I'm just like, huh, like he really only had like a dozen, or a baker's dozen, like televised matches in WWE, and only like 2 pay-per-view matches, I think, is all he had. which is like crazy. It's like Canadian Stampede, and then the one where he got the managerial services of Marlena, or if you want to call them managerial services of Marlena for the 30 days, like which is also
SummerSlam '97. Yeah, and
yeah,
those were back-to-back months.
yeah. I think those were like his only pay-per-view appearances in ring for WWE, if I'm not mistaken. And then like
Yeah, I
also
don't
like a
doubt
chunk,
it.
and then also like a chunk of it was air quotes wasted by uh the gimmick he had going on during the Goldust feud, where he was wrestling in a dress. He spent like a month in a dress, losing what should have been squash matches or to people who like usually never win, because Goldust would come out and something would happen and like Pillman would lose, whether via roll up or he'd get so upset he'd go get counted out. Like, because I think he lost listed like he's like one of the few guys with quote unquote name value that Flash Funk ever beat, if I remember correctly. I'd have to go cage match and all that stuff, but
Flash Funk. I remember Flash Funk.
speaking of Too Cold Scorpio,
Cold
and
Scorpio.
his we're going full circle on that one. He was like almost like the Godfather before the Godfather could exist, because they weren't quite there in the Attitude Era, but he was still breaking
Take a
out.
crazy high flying true heavyweight. Just put a gimmick on. Like that's all that was, right? Like I never minded Flash Funk because it was like he was still wrestling as Too Cold Scorpio. They didn't, there's like here's some sizzle to go with the steak, right? Like I never got like, because I remember in real time, like when he went back to ECW and people were crapping on it, I was like, what's the big deal? It's not like he was Mantar or something. You know what I mean? Like it was, they had him come out with a couple of hot chicks and still let him go out there and do all the flips he wanted. Like I don't know I didn't understand then. I don't understand now why like it's such a bad rap. But it was the new generation, so
yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'd rather see Flash Funk than the 10 minutes after Flash Funk, where he was just Scorpio with the Job Squad, with his hair pulled back and wearing a cutoff tee. Like that did nothing for me. Like even as a Scorpio fan, but which is sad because I loved everything Al Snow back in the day. But like the rest of the Job Squad, like really didn't do nothing for me. Like I don't know if that was just my age or they just took all the cool colors from Flash Funk and made them lame.
Yeah, Hardcore Holly sure spun that into a hell of a run. He stretched that shit out to what, 03, 04?
Yeah, like that was like Job Squad was the genesis of Hardcore Holly, and then like they spun that off into the Hardcore title feud, which then like actually made got people's attention that he was actually a decent, he could be a decent character guy despite being saddled with Thurman Sparky Plug and Bob Sparkplug Holly and
Sparkplug Holly.
And all the and then we tried to remove the New Midnight Express from our cultural zeitgeist.
Bombastic Bob and Bodacious Bart. No.
Of course, that was the debut of the Bleach Blonde Bombastic Bart, Bleach Blonde, and still had the mullet though. And it was
they were both rocking mullets, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Bart Gunn, I guess Bart Gunn always had a mullet up until he kind of like got the crop cut thing going on to him, and then Brawl for All happened, and the less that we think about him, the better, I guess, after that point, because they stopped caring despite him winning that tournament.
Yeah, the Dark Side of the Ring on that was wild. Got punished for winning. Very wrestling. Wrestling.
I still think it's funny because like it's low key, like they'd been warned like a handful of times of like Bart's legit. Like if you want this to be real, don't put Bart in here. And then like whatever, we're gonna put Bart in here, and like sure enough, like the only person he didn't knock out was, I think, Hardcore Holly was the only person he didn't knock out. Everybody else fell to that left hand.
Yeah, and then Butterbean. Butterbean happened. Wild.
And then he turned that into a small career in Japan. Like he did a handful of years with All Japan, teaming up with Johnny Ace. It was the Golden Left, I think it was the Golden Left. I don't think they named him Hands of Stone, but I think he was the Golden Left, and got a short like tag run with Johnny Ace for a bit.
Well, good because Johnny Ace was up there, especially that would have been what, the late '90s, early 2000s. Yeah, Johnny Ace was late '90s, early 2000s. Johnny Ace was on the top, was near the top of the card in All Japan. So I didn't realize. I knew that Barkon had gone to Japan. I didn't realize that he was working. I didn't realize he worked with Johnny Ace though. That's funny.
Yeah, I don't think it was. I don't think it was terribly long because I think Johnny Ace was literally kind of on his way out. Not maybe not quite out the door, but he was wrapping up the in ring stuff. I know it wouldn't be long before he was out the door to be a agent producer in WCW towards the end of the days. Wrestling's 6 degrees. Like wrestling is 6 degrees. Like Kevin Bacon, we did like pick a wrestler and see if we can either through matches or gimmicks and tags like connect two guys and like you get some nexus points. I think the current nexus point should probably be Ricky Morton right now, just because he's still out there.
Oh yeah,
still stuff.
Still going. He was just on that
As,
he was on the GCW Mall show. Just working with Little Guido, I think, right?
Something like that. And I think it's hilarious, like how like he does a lot of stuff with his son, which is good on them keeping the family together. But like he's still like I guess technically he's a tweener, but he still just acts like a good guy going out there. And then Kerry is like the most hated guy in a lot of Southern independents, and I think that's hilarious. Where Ricky comes out doing the rock and roll stuff, and then Kerry goes off telling everyone how they suck so much because they're a garbage town and whatever he can get. But I just think it's hilarious that Ricky's out there just like proud papa, like, yeah, the boy's right. And then wrestling, as classic Ricky Morton, as his son's poking eyes and pulling the hair and using the ropes and all this stuff. I think it's hilarious.
Wrestling. RASSLIN. That's wrestling.
Tirades aside about our classic wrestling. So, like, what got you into the business? What made you cross that line of fan to professional wrestler yourself?
I was at a freelance wrestling show. I had been going to freelance wrestling shows at the Logan Square Auditorium. Once they started running the shows there, once they moved away from right by where the White Sox play is where they had started running. And then them and AAW kind of started running the Logan Square Auditorium pretty regularly. And I was going to a bunch of freelance shows. And especially at that time, it was a different atmosphere. I hadn't been to many different indies, right? But I've been to pre-Sinclair Ring of Honor. I've been to AAW a bunch of times when they were still in Berwyn. I'm one of the few graduates of Black and Brave to actually have seen the Black and Brave tag team, to have seen Merrick and Tyler as a team. The vibe at freelance was just different back then, and it's been a while since I've been to one, so I don't know if it's different or changed. Now everything changes, right? But it was such a positive atmosphere. It didn't feel like any other wrestling show I'd really ever been to up to that point. So that's the good and the bad. The bad was there was just this god-awful tag team with these two just almost stereotypical fat shindy wrestlers. I don't remember them. I don't have to protect their name, right? You know what I mean? I don't remember who they were. And it was the combination of those two where I was like, man, I might be a little old, but I can do better than that for sure. And this is great. Like, I love this. I want to do this. I should have done this out of high school. Didn't. But man, I love wrestling. Sorry for swearing. I love wrestling. And that was awful, right? I can definitely do better than that. And that was the exception to the rule. Let me make sure to say that as well, right? 9 out of 10 freelance matches were very good. They still put together great cards. They run at a, in addition to running Logan Square, they run at a beercade, an arcade, like an adult arcade down the street from Logan Square Auditorium that I've been to hundreds of times. Absolutely awesome. And back then, I remember you had Kylie Ray and GPA told this amazing story that I was in the crowd for the whole time. And there was a whole, like, their scrambles were good. Their singles matches were good. The Kylie Ray GPA thing is one of the only intergender things I've ever seen that I was ever personally entertained by. So it was a combination of all these good things and then just seeing this god-awful match. And I was like, man, I can do this, even though I'm probably older than the average pro wrestling trainee. So I'm going to go do it. And I knew the Black and Brave Wrestling Academy existed. I was in the crowd at AAW when Eddie Machete and Connor Braxton made their pro wrestling debuts, or at least their AAW debuts, fresh off of Class 1. So I was aware of it. I was also aware of other schools in the area, in the Chicagoland area at the time. And I was just under the impression of, why go and get trained by someone I've never heard of, who's producing no one I've ever heard of, when I can go and potentially get trained by someone who's on WWE. But I knew Tyler Black. I'd seen Tyler Black's whole AAW and ROH run. But I can still remember. I can still picture it. I can still picture myself there and being like, no, I'm doing this. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do this. I want to do this. I should have done it, and why not? The time's gonna pass anyway. So that would be the moment for sure.
And just for everyone's education, both freelance and AAW are still going strong. And you bring up Kylie Ray; I believe she's still freelance champion right now. So she's still out there killing it in Logan Square, wherever where they're running. I don't keep full tabs on them. Like I think I last watched the September. I think it was the September show. But I keep. There's so much wrestling in my rotation, I can't keep track of it all. But anyway,
yeah, there's too much wrestling. Yeah, there's too much wrestling in general. That's just the nature of the beast, right? But so it's both good and bad, as is life, right? We just got to kind of pick and choose. You got to find what you like and just stick with that, because nowadays it is impossible to just kind of keep tabs on, or you can keep tabs on everything. To actively watch everything is impossible, right?
Oh, well, as I say, like someone who consumes all of it, like at a certain level, this is the best time to be a wrestling fan, because so much is out there at your fingertips. And so if if you're willing to put in a little bit of work just to find the wrestler, and have half an idea of kind of what you're looking for, you can find it. Like there's still some voids that some companies left, because I don't think there's been a proper no one's quite filled the void slightly left by Lucha Underground and Chikara. I know some companies have kind of half tried, but I think there's still a void on that front. But as a whole, if you're willing to put in a little bit of legwork, if you're into the lucha, there's a batch of American lucha companies running around now. There's obviously death matches are still a thing. Wrestling spelled with an A, plenty of that going around too. But how much of a shock was going in, being a fan and being in crowds, to then get trained and then actually be in the ring yourself? How much of a shock to the system, or maybe even to say child Augustus was it?
Well, being a creator and being a consumer are two completely different things. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. There is absolutely nothing in common between being a consumer and being a creator. It's two completely different aspects. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about pro wrestling or painting, acting or musicians, and a software designer versus a video game player, right? They are two completely different worlds. There is nothing in common between being an active performer and being a passive fan.
Fair point. And I guess in that case, then I guess I'll phrase it a little bit more like this. So how the training itself, how hard was that, even physically and or emotionally? Again, just kind of knowing what about what you thought you knew about the business, and now getting in there and running the drills or doing the creative aspect of it.
Oh yeah, well the physical training itself is the hardest physical thing I've ever done in my life, especially back then. It was a different environment. Literally was in a different building on a different side of the Mississippi River than where it is now. Seth Rollins was in a completely different stage of his life and of his career back then. The school was still, I was class 11, so running 3 classes a year. The school was still kind of new. So it was, everything related to the school and the training has changed since I went through the camp. But when I was in the camp, it was intensely difficult What I'll tell people is, unless you've done Division I college athletics or military training, it's going to be the hardest physical thing you've ever done in your life. And it was very much hard. Um, you know, I emailed, I communicated with Merrick Bray via email beforehand, just not looking for any shortcuts or hacks, but just asking, well, what do you think I can do to prepare? And he was like, do we do CrossFit? So if you do some CrossFit, that will probably help you, and that did help a little bit. But in terms of wrestling training, nothing can prepare you because nothing can prepare anyone. It's like sticking. You could be the biggest music fan in the world. You stick a guitar in someone's hand, they're not going to know what to do, and it's going to be confusing and embarrassing and painful to learn an instrument or to play a sport. You take the NFL's biggest fan, drop them on a practice field. That isn't going to help them run the drills, right? And for me, I had, I guess, a little more of a unique experience. It's a 12-week camp. On the last practice of week 4, I broke my floating rib in a drill. I had bruised it a week or two prior in a drill, and I never missed a single practice either before or after. Right, so I broke my rib on a Thursday night. I was at CrossFit practice on Friday morning. Right, crying my eyes out doing the CrossFit drills, and I never missed a single practice for the remaining 8 weeks. So it was the most painful experience of my life physically. It was the most mentally challenging part of my life. Emotionally, it's right up there under some personal stuff, right? I lost both my parents in a 5-year period from 2014 through 2020, or 6-year period. So that was difficult. But right under that would be the experience of completing the camp with a broken rib, right? I could do no side to side movement without intense stabbing pain, right? Which means I wasn't sleeping for more than 20 minutes at a time. The CrossFit training was extra difficult, right? I had to channel my old man wrestling heroes, Diamond Dallas Page and Jerry Lynn, and had to wrap my midsection in layers, right? I used a copper fit lower back wrap, a bunch of athletic tape, and an ace bandage to kind of just kind of make it more, or just make it so there would be a little less movement. Still very painful. Eventually, I had to buy a mouth guard to bite down on because you open the camp, or you open every practice by doing 15 bumps, 15 to 20 bumps at the beginning of every practice after a certain point. And then there's, learning all the moves, and uh, they're not just, they're not going to let me nor anyone just get by. Oh, Anthony's a little hurt, so we're going to let him half-ass it. Or Anthony's kind of in pain, so we're going to let him, not technically execute this move correctly and put him and his training partner in literal physical danger, right? Like, so yeah, very hard, very challenging. Not for the weak not for the faint of heart, not for the weak-minded, not for the weak-bodied. Um, you know, anyone who's thinking about doing it, I would say, well, that's a whole other can of worms, right? But yeah, so intensely painful, intensely challenging, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
I mean that part of the story is like, I think everyone kind of has that they never expect it, and then it's its own, like, even the realm of athletics, it's its own skill set. And obviously, I'm not speaking from any sort of actual experience on that, because there's a reason I'm on the other side of the proverbial barricade, or just screaming into a microphone and being a keyboard warrior. But I like the two things, like, I do think about it, like, when I hear is, like, one, like, I believe it was Warhorse. It basically just said, like, nothing's going to prepare you for it, but the best thing you could do is just learn how to run a lot before going into camp, because at least that way some of your cardio will be, I'm not going to say up to speed, but at least you'll be used to running and not breathing properly.
Yeah, you need to have good cardio. That is true for training and to be a competent performer, right?
Yeah. And then is Jimmy Jacobs. As Jimmy Jacobs for sure, but it was during the early days of Evolve when they were really hammering home, like, the different styles of their performers, and they did like a short profile of everyone. And they one of the questions was asked is like, how do you like what how do you train, or like what is your style of training? And like everybody, either talked about their weightlifting routine, or like they talked about like their football drills. Jimmy Jacobs is just like, I wrestle all the time. That is the only thing that simulates wrestling, is to go wrestle. So I wrestle all of the time. And he
Yeah,
didn't
ring
pull back
shape. Yep.
yeah, he didn't pull back the curtain and just be like, I did practice matches in my garage, or went to this training academy and worked with the youngins. Like, he just said, I wrestle as much as I can. I wrestle a lot. And for those of you who are only familiar with Jimmy Jacobs, like as a creative mind, like, I mean, he was never a big guy, but he was a very underrated wrestler. And
Yeah, the Age of the Fall is some of my personal
oh,
favorite stuff of all time. Right, I hold Age of the Fall, Jimmy Jacobs, and that whole stable right up there with like Loose Cannon, Brian Pillman as some of my personal favorite stuff ever. But I feel if you put that his mic work, his character work, the stories they told with him and Lacey and Tyler, and later with Austin Aries, his work with BJ Whitmer, of course. I think you can put that work against anything that's ever been done in pro wrestling. And in terms of entertainment value and execution, I think it holds up with anything that's ever been done in pro wrestling.
and his character transformation, like that led into the Age of the Fall, led to the Age of the Fall, was like amazing, because he was just a dude that, I don't want to say he lost a lot by like flukes, but he was always like a perennial
But the
underdog. Like
the
he
son of
never had,
Berserker, the son of
yeah, yeah,
Berserker, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
Jimmy loves Lacey. Yeah.
yeah, but like he was never like a threat, even as a multiple time tag team champion, and like part of one of the more successful stables in Ring of Honor at the time, with Lacey's Angels and whatnot. Like, he was never considered a serious threat, and really, like, yeah, he had his moments, especially the feud with BJ, but it wasn't until the Age of the Fall where like people went like, oh, that dude's nuts, like actual nuts, and will kill you. Like,
Yes.
um but actually, like, it was Age of, and that really blew my mind, because my first experience with Jimmy, and by proxy Tyler Black, was actually doing it for her in Wrestling Society X. And then going over, flipping things over, within the year, seeing it on the message boards and like baby clips on baby YouTube. And like, you got the guy who was like getting girls' phone numbers, hanging out with this screamy mosh pitting guy, and now he's literally bathing in somebody's blood, cutting a promo. Just mind blown. And like, I was well into adulthood at this time. I was like 25 years old and having my mind blown by this stuff.
Yeah,
It
and
was
that
crazy.
promo happened after one of the greatest ladder matches of all time, Steen and Generico versus the Briscoes, the first ladder war, right? So like that whole show, that whole night was crazy historic, right? That's the first gimmick. That match had the first gimmick ladder spot. So there's a lot of history associated with the Age of the Fall debut.
But it was crazy go nuts. And so like that, the range was like sold me on Jimmy Jacobs. And then Tyler Black guy, like, I think he did all right for himself too, of course. uh but joking aside, but yeah, so you've gone through the training, and hardest thing, but like, and so how did that translate, like, and at least mentally, like, going into like the character side of it, so like how did this like drive the creation of Augustus Draven?
Oh, I had the character before I got here, right? Like, so I had brainstormed the name, the character. I had, that's a creative brainstorming process, right? Like, I mean, I have a bachelor's degree, and not that that means anything other than I've I've taken a lot of classes on the creative process, right? So whether it's writing, whether it's audio, video, art, right? Like, so I have like just kind of a background in um, in the creative process, so to speak, right? For lack of a better words, not that it makes me more creative or better than anyone, right? College degrees, at least mine hasn't been worth a whole hell of a lot other than the debt. But having learned how to brainstorm, having learned about the creative process was very beneficial. So I didn't just, for me, I didn't just have to be like, start from scratch. I didn't have to just be like, um, my real name's Anthony. So it's like, I'm Anthony and I love to wrestle. And I'm going to spend the next X number of years of my career uh, trying to figure out a character, right? Like, I was able to take all these different pop culture figures, concepts, icons, people, and kind of put them through multiple brainstorming processes and come up with an idea of, and multiple ideas of how I want to present myself, how I want to present the character, right? And then it's just a limit of, just like everything else in the world, money, right? Because to present yourself in a creative, artistic way takes money. Whereas someone who just wants to be, um, I'm I'm Joe Blow and I'm the best wrestler in the world. I'm the best, I love wrestling and I'm going to be the best wrestler. All that costs is gear. All you need is gear, a car, and gasoline, right? And then you can just go wrestle, right? But to present yourself in a unique, creative, artistic way takes resources. So I had the idea before I ever got to the camp, and then just like everything else in life, it evolves. It flows. What works, what doesn't work. I thought this look might be better. Oh, but it turns out this is better. On life is on the job training in that respect, and everything changes. The only constant. So there's different aspects of it that change. The vision we have in our head very rarely, for the majority of us, executes perfectly in the external physical world, right? But the core of the Augustus Draven character presentation has essentially remained the same, right? And I had that before I ever got into the character, and that's just a product of being an older guy, right? Again, it doesn't make me better than any wrestler. I like to passively shit on the person who just wants to be the best wrestler they can be, right? Because we have an overabundance of that in the independent wrestling world, in the pro wrestling world, right? But it's totally normal for a 17, 18, 19-year-old coming out of high school, or they went to high school, maybe some community college, now they're going to go do wrestling. They have no life experience. They know nothing of life. They just know their favorite movies, music, and TV shows, and maybe they're going to try to take a couple of things, right, and try to apply it to their wrestling, right, and kind of be their character is a cover band, and then they're just going to try to wrestle with it. That's totally normal and natural. Me just having lived a whole life before I came into wrestling, like I knew what I wanted to do, and it was just a matter of presenting it and executing it with extremely limited resources.
And I think that the some of the issue with wrestling, especially at the early stages of the career, is doing something to set yourself apart. And like that's kind of one of the things that has drawn me to Augustus Draven, is that like even if we'll say the promotion doesn't have the resources to give Draven kind of like the atmosphere he should have given his character, or how I interpret the character through my lens, but like the promos and just like some of the social media aspect, like I find very fascinating that like no one else is really doing. Even if you're not cutting a promo per se, it's just the of flow of the like animations that go along with the filtered pictures that from whatever the last event was, or promo pictures or whatever, and then how you've been variations of like inserting your logo in there as well, along with the music. Just the full presentation I always thought was very fascinating, and no one was bothering to do that. Which,
oh, thank you, I appreciate that. It's I that means a lot. It's good to see people notice it, and then that's one where I'll say it doesn't make me better than, but no one else is doing what I do. No one else is doing what I do, right? I mean, period, right? So it doesn't mean that I'm better than anyone. It doesn't, but in terms of creativity and creative presentation, I am different from everyone, right? And that's very much on purpose. So people, and again, it doesn't mean that I should be this, right? I'm no martyr, right? I'm not one of those people who thinks I'm chronically slept on. But it also doesn't mean I'm just another run of the mill indie guy. Like my presentation style and my creativity in terms of that takes a back seat to no one in independent wrestling at any level of unsigned talent, right? That aspect of me can be presented up there with anybody that's an unsigned independent talent for sure.
And that's something I think, as like faux advice to anyone listening, like that's something you can control. Like you can't always
Yes.
control what goes on with your bookings. Like you may not have control how long your match is going to be. You may not have control about the dynamics of the match, but the thing you can control is the stuff outside of the ring, and that is your social media, your gear, your logo. Oh, to gear to a certain extent, gear is expensive, but like within a certain investment, your gear, your logos, etc., 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 things to kind of like set you apart. And you don't necessarily have to go all out with this, but you just need to make sure you make yourself noticeable. And again, tailoring into our guest, like that is something like caught my attention online. And I think it's a stark contrast to, like, I mostly know your work through SCW Pro, and I think the character and the outside, how the character is presented is very an interesting dichotomy with how, I don't want to say how you're presented in SCW Pro, but whom you've been associated with in SCW Pro. You've come in with the Miss Night Society with JT Energy. You've been a member of the Shadow Hunters with Jay Marston, which, like, in terms of presentation, that was like night and day. And then even now with your association with the Chosen, like, there's Augustus Draven doing Augustus Draven things, and then here's Eric Esnight doing Eric Esnight things, and I won't say they're incompatible, but they are drastically different.
Yeah, being different's good, right? So that's something I learned as a fan. That's Terry Funk 101. I heard as a fan, I heard Terry Funk say it, and then I heard the Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, Raven, Taz all say that Terry Funk taught them, kid, you gotta do something to separate yourself, right? And they all made that a cornerstone of their presentation. Shane Douglas, I know, was another one I heard as a fan. Just credit Terry Funk as, you got to do something to separate yourself. You got to do something to make yourself look different, right? And that is something that I always valued as a fan, right? As a fan, the people I liked were all, or maybe not all, but the majority of wrestlers I hold in high regard all did that. All presented themselves differently, whether that was promo, look, between the ropes, right? And then even the people I listed earlier, right? Loose Cannon, Brian Pillman, Age of the Fall, right? Harlem Heat, all very different. And then I said my three favorite wrestlers, Bret Hart, AJ Styles, CM Punk, all had unique presentation styles or things they did that separated themselves, whether between the ropes with their aesthetic, or on the microphone, or in combination, that separated themselves from everybody. And then in terms of how I'm presented in SCW Pro, want to definitely give thanks to Merrick Brave. He had, when I was first going to be booked there, he had a vision for my character in terms of, it was very simple. And he was like, I don't see you in bike shorts. I see you in pants. And at the time I was wrestling in bike shorts, biker shorts with my logo on it, etc. And I liked it. And he was very, it wasn't like a flippant or a disrespectful comment. He wasn't insulting me. It was just very much like, I just see you in pants, but not just any pants, like, some kind, a kind of a darker style of pants. And we kind of collaborated on that. And then when I came in with JT, I had the closest equivalent would be Jeff Hardy, right? Kind of Hardy Boys pants, just with more metal on him, more chains and stuff. And I just remember kind of showing that to him, like, is this kind of what you see? He's like, yeah, that. And as I have evolved over the years, when I look back on my old stuff before I came into SCW and my stuff now, I look more like a character, an authentic character with the pants. Whereas I looked like a wrestler before. I looked like a wrestler playing a character before. And the pants, along with the rest of my aesthetic, made me look more like an authentic character. And that is a big piece that I'm very grateful to Merrick Ray for. Because at first I wasn't resistant to it. I mean, I was, but I wasn't like, how dare you? Do you know who the hell I am? I'm Augustus Draven. I have 100 followers on Instagram. What do you mean I have to change my look? But he was so dead on, and that was his main point. Right? He's like, you just kind of look like a wrestler now. And he's like, you don't want to just look like a wrestler. That's not the character. I was like, correct. It's very important. I don't want to just look like a wrestler. I want to look like a character. A character coming to life who's coming into the wrestling ring, coming into people's screens or into the arena, and that was a big help in terms of my physical real time presentation style, as opposed to the way I present myself in my promos and social media.
I've seen some of those. We'll call them. I like to call them baby pictures, but seen some pictures with the old style biker shorts. I'm just like, that doesn't look right.
It doesn't anymore. Yeah, it doesn't.
And there's just like something small about that. Like you're right. Like it just something about it just doesn't sit. And it's amazing, like such a small change can affect a presentation, because it's not like your pants are overly elaborate or anything. It's not like there's 18 different shades of black or whatever. Like they are, it's comparatively speaking, like very just basic, but it's just like,
yes,
I know but I think it adds so much more. Or at least maybe this is me like watching, the last 5 years of Augustus Draven, like my lens of that coming through. But like it's just like, I think it adds, as is one of those like little intangibilities that like you wouldn't sit there and just necessarily just go like, yeah, that should change everything, like, because why should it? But it really does.
But the little things are the big things, and pro wrestling is all about the little things. All aspects of pro wrestling are about the little things, and the little things are the big things, right? And so just that little tweak can make a world of difference. And it was like I was saying a little earlier, very rarely for any of us does our internal vision and our imagination match up with how it's executed in external reality, in any aspect of life. You know what I mean? Pro wrestling, again, the more time I spend in pro wrestling, the more time I find it completely ununique to life. Life, because pro wrestling is a part of life, right? And that was one of those things. I had been creating myself in video games for years and years and years, right? And I didn't always have biker shorts, but the vision of Augustus Draven, at least early on, that was part of that vision, right? And a lot more body paint, right? More like faux tattoo body paint, right? I started doing it with like painting my logo on my chest, right? But that initial vision had like chest, back, and some arms, right? But very much with the biker shorts. And sure, in a video game, it is one thing. In my mind's eye, that's another thing. But in external physical reality, it's something different. And that change that Merrick suggested made all the difference. And you're exactly right. I look back on I don't cringe. It's not, I'm not ashamed of it. And it's not like I'm not just trying to be cool to not shit on myself. But whenever I look at it, the first thing that goes through my head is, yeah, the pants are much better.
I was gonna say, like, it's like, there's nothing cringe about it. Like, they weren't like obscenely gaudy or whatever, but it's just like a little thing. It just goes like, just something off about it. Just not.
Yes.
But it's a life is a game of inches. There we go. Spit it out. Life is a game of inches, and art imitates life. So we're gonna run and torture all these metaphors to look at wrestling.
Well, cliches are cliches for a reason. Yeah. So no, don't feel bad about that. Cliches are cliches for a reason, and it's there's a reason the classics never go out of style.
I do have to ask though. So as I said, like presentation wise, you've set yourself apart from a lot of your peers, but you kind of originally came to prominence in SCW with JT Energy, who is another, no pun intended, another different cat. Like, what was it like, kind of like being able to like, collaborate with him and like in the Miss Night Society, because I was he rocking the turban yet at that point, or
Yes.
I know it all kind of runs together like up until he's jumped into the feline stuff now, but like what like comparatively like what is that like running with some guy who's also like dare I say like out there, at least in terms of like how he presents himself, compared to like we'll say now with like the Chosen, who is very meat and potatoes like in their presentation, like outside of yourself, like throwing everyone else in the Chosen out under the bus for that.
Well, JT was great to work with, right? So we already had gotten along, right? We got along when I was in the camp, and he was working with Jossie, Vicious and Delicious, right? I got along with both of them great at the time, and we still do, right? We still, we'll talk backstage. We always have good rapport, a lot of mutual respect there. So it was very good because he was very welcoming, and he was very much about putting his hand out. Right, he was about putting his hand out to help pick me up rather than putting his hand on my head to push me down. You know what I mean? And he's still like that with everyone. JT wants to bring people up. Right, there's more than enough to go around. Right, we live in an abundant world. There's more than enough to go around, and people choosing to perceive things through a selfish lens doesn't do anybody any favors. And it doesn't mean that there isn't an abundance. There's more than enough for all of us to eat, right? In life and in pro wrestling, there's more than enough spots, right? Once you're talking outside of the main event of WrestleMania, there is more than enough spots. There's more than enough matches. There's more than enough spots on the card. There's more, you know what I mean? And he was all about that. Like, cool, I'm going to work with Anthony. How can I help you? How can I help you? And how can I help him? Right. So it was very much synergistic from the word go. And he was very receptive to any and all of my ideas and suggestions. But I was very much just following his lead. Right. He was the established guy. When I came in, he won the Iowa title, was my first show with him. So I certainly wasn't going to confuse myself my first day in with being on par with the top guy, or at worst, the number two guy. You know what I mean? Like that Iowa title has got decades of history, does it not? Right. So if you got that Iowa title, what is the top title? Is it the SW Pro title? Is it the Iowa title? I think that's a great thing that we have these two different titles up there. And so he could have easily been like, mouth shut, ears open, do what I say, please, yes, and thank you. And then maybe I'll get you a match somewhere down the line. No, it was the total opposite. He was so kind and was willing to teach and willing to help. And I thought it was a great partnership. I thought it had more legs, but it definitely served its purpose, because by the time the Miss Night Society was done, he was elevated to the main event level. Right, he went from kind of being a tag team to kind of a middle of the card guy. And when we ran our program, it may have only been a one match program, but the moment that led to our split and then the actual split, that still to this day gives me goosebumps. And that's still to this day is the best thing I've done in pro wrestling, was literally having the crowd in the palm of our hand when we did our split. And he was literally able to quiet an entire crowd just by motioning his hand down. And there wasn't even a smart ass in the crowd trying to make noise to get themselves over. Or, you know what I mean? Like, we had, I don't know, 150 people maybe in there. And like, that was magic. And to be a part of that magic, Shane Hollister was right up in there as well. Shug, just, one of the great performers that I've ever known, as a fan and as a worker. And, I was very happy to have worked in a collaborative process for that whole year and a half, and then to have, gotten the crowd to emotionally invest in us in a way that then we were able to spin him off into the top babyface in the promotion within 1 month of our split. So I have nothing but good things to say about JT Energy, the man, the performer, and my time working with him in the Miss Night Society. That was a great thing. Every entry level independent pro wrestler should be so lucky to have that be their entrance. I was very fortunate for that to kind of be my entree into SCW Pro and to have something consistent as opposed to just making the rounds to various indies, getting a match here, a battle royal here, a pre-show scramble there, to actually come into a storyline, a 1 year story, was just great, absolutely great.
And it was amazing. Like I was there that night, like that when JT got the title and all the split. Like it, yeah. The, it's hard to come by in wrestling just because the crowd tends to, how do I say without like shitting all over the crowd necessarily, but like the crowd really does like to like get their own attention at various points, and sometimes the best way to do that is
Yes.
like, oh, it's quiet, like I'm going to say something snarky, and there was nothing. Like no, like we were all waiting to see what JT was going to do, whether he was going whether he was going to continue on this dark path, because like he's always up till that point, like he'd always been a heel. He'd always been like, at various points you could argue, like the biggest heel in the company. Like maybe it was a tie with Joss C when Vicious and Delicious were together, but like they were main event, varying times, like main eventing as the tag team champs even, and just to like waiting to see like was he going to accept the help or was he going to do this on his own, and then choosing to do the honorable thing, just, and then the pop afterwards was just freaking amazing. And like I know, because I was one of those noises. The wife was one of those noises, in addition to everybody else, and it was amazing. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about JT is such a creative mind, and it's like such a good dude, just like willing to kind of like,
very creative,
and just willing to kind of just go like do whatever to kind of get himself out there. And he kind of deserves all the best things in wrestling, which sad face, in theory would also mean the loss of him locally, but I can't hold people down. I can't chain people to the area in my just for my hopes and dreams and whatnot. But kind of again going tailoring back to you, I am going to try to wander down because I failed when I did our pre talk of 45-minute warning in here. Yeah, skip that over quite a bit. So I'll kind of wind things down with a couple of questions. We'll say
okay.
this is kind of like where some of the snark will come in. One I do for all the SCW guys, but you also talked about like not being selfish, that there's a piece of the pie for everyone in the industry, and I think it's kind of apropos for the question I'm going to ask. But you've been very much, at least at SCW, a mechanic of sorts in terms of your role, whether it's coming in with the Miss Night Society, with the Shadow Hunters, with Jay Marston, and then by proxy Connor Braxton, and now your role in the Chosen. Like, when are we going to see Augustus Draven break out? And I'm not going to necessarily say be a free man, because we can as we've seen with the New Day, you could still break out, be like one of the guys, and still be in a group. But like, when are we going to see Augustus Draven just go nuts and kind of this is Augustus Draven? Like, he may be part of the Chosen, but that's Augustus Draven, if my phrasing makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I'm my only limiter. So you know what I mean? Like, so everything in this world costs money, and I haven't put in nearly enough miles. I am not within the realm of having put in nearly enough miles. I haven't gotten myself out there nearly enough. So I have no one to blame. There's no shade. No one's holding me back. I'm not slept on. If anyone's played politics on me, right over my head. You know what I mean? So I'm happy and grateful for the consistency that SCW Pro has provided me. Anything outside of that, that's all on me, right? Like I said, everything in this world costs money, and it's never been more expensive to live in my lifetime. You know what I mean? 40-year high inflation, and I'm not 40. So getting on the road has been prohibitively expensive, and any limits of my character or any limits on my career are all due to my personal shortcomings in terms of sacrificing my time for money. It's just that simple, right? So hopefully things will change, but that's all up to me and the way I think, perceive, feel, and act in day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year life as a human, right? It's Augustus Draven is only held back by myself as a human being and my personal shortcomings. Sorry if that's a downer answer or not what you were hoping to hear, but it is the truth.
Oh, the truth, I much rather have the truth than, certain other answers that it can be given. However, you could be, I don't want to say, you weren't necessarily self-depreciating. Modest. We'll use the term modest. I think that is the actual proper term. But myself, and I will, dare I say, lump the Wizard CZ in of the Card Subjects to Change podcast with me on this one. But like, this one of the things we talk about, like, as fans, we're as fans, we sometimes like to fantasy book or be like, wow, we'd really like to see this guy, go up the card or do X, Y, and Z. And you're one of the names that we pop up, like, even within, like, just within SCW Pro, we're just like, man, we'd really just like to see him like do something, say, with like the QC Cup, or do something, Iowa Championship, or do, just something, I don't want to say like extra, but just, to and and how I would say this, like, makes this sound like I'm not like grateful or not that you don't have a good spot where you're at now, because Lord also, we all know, like, if you listen to me, this the Camera household is a chosen household, but and not just the Bliss book, but like, this is one of the things, like, CZ and I talk about, is just like, we would like to see, I don't know, like, you get an opportunity to break out a bit more even within SCW Pro, just because
You're talking about me being a featured performer. You would like me to see it be a featured performer of the company,
or get a bigger, like, I don't know, a better opportunity to say to be as such, because you've always been, I called it a mechanic. Like, there's been a hole placed and they put you in it, which, don't get me wrong, is a great role to have. That is how you get longevity in companies in the business. Again, we're a Stevie Richards household as well, and that's how he had a hole, he filled the hole, had a longer WWE career than a lot of other folks. But like, oh, even he had chances to shine every now and again. And I think, like, that's one of those things, is like, like myself, and again, like CZ, and any other people that will dare listen to me occasionally, like, just kind of waiting for the day for Augustus Draven to kind of be able to have something to sink his teeth in. Not
well, I do appreciate
solo.
that. I do appreciate what you're saying. I'm grateful to have people out there who think and feel that way. I have had this exact direct conversation over text and in person, and the last time it was broached, my exact wording was, I do not need to be a featured performer, but I do need singles matches. I still need singles reps, right? And I think my singles performances have proven that I could be considered worthy of being a featured performer, but that is not my priority right now. My priority is, so I don't mind being in the chosen, or being, because my entire time in SCW, I've been a secondary player or a tertiary player, a third wheel. That is fine as long as I'm still having singles matches. I still need those reps. I've never had a match where I actually needed to show it to someone to know what I did wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I'll show matches and get critiques, but I've never had one yet where I'm like, yep, knocked it out of the park. Let me show this match to somebody so they can tell me what I did wrong. I'm usually aware in live time the errors I'm making in the ring, which means I still need reps, and I need those reps as a singles performer. So I can be in a stable, I can be in a team, I could be a background player, I could be just on my own and getting cold singles matches, right? So the period of time between the Chosen and the Shadowhunters with Braxton, I was essentially just having cold singles matches, but I loved it because it gave me a chance to heat the matches up with my promos, and then it gave me singles match reps. And I'm still very much at the level where I need singles match reps. And just in these last few months, I've gotten a few singles matches with Dion, Jack Reaper, and there's another one that's kind of escaping me right now. That'll probably come to me. Oh, Alonzo. And all those matches I did better. Like each match I thought was a better performance and a performance that shows that I'm at least good enough to keep getting singles matches. But I don't at this stage, no one's going to turn down being a top guy. Of course, I would welcome it and I would love to have it. And I'm very grateful to have people who are audibly pushing for it and who also see that maybe I'm better than the role I have been casting up to this point. But as long I'm very much at a stage where within the confines of SCW, as long as I'm getting singles matches on a consistent basis, I'm good. And if and trust the process and trust the story, you know what I mean? Because there was a point where I did think I was like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't be in another number 3 role. What would I be in the Chosen? I'd be at best the number 3, it maybe the number 4. So hey, maybe have I earned something more than that, or maybe are my performances dictate that I'm better than that? But then I realized and talked with them and just be like, if they don't see me as a featured performer, that's fine. Please just keep giving me some singles matches. And they have, and I am genuinely happy and grateful for them. There's no, I'm not biting my tongue. You know what I mean? I'm very much as so if they want me to use my creative talents to help them tell stories with people they believe in more to be featured acts, I'm happy to do that as long as I can still get my singles match reps. That's a priority. And then anything beyond that, I am welcome to, no one's holding a gun to my head and telling me to wrestle for SW Pro, right? So I am able, if I don't like, if I was really unhappy, then I can take myself to any one of the tens of thousands of indies, in America, or the 500 indies in the Midwest, right? But as long as I'm getting consistent singles matches, I'm happy with what I'm doing, and I'm equally grateful to have someone like yourself and the Wizard CZ pushing for me to be more of a featured performer. But at the same time, in that same vein, I don't mind if I'm not cast in that role, as long as I'm getting the opportunities to get the reps as a singles performer. Sorry if I think I repeated myself like 5 times there, so I apologize for that.
No, it's fine. And when I say this, I'm not like, this is not like, and I'm not trying to like hijack shows, or like I'm never like trying to text or DM Merrick or do anything like that. As I said, I framed it as more like we all, like as fans, we all have our favorites, and we all like want our the people we enjoy to have, to whether it's move up the card or be a bit more featured within the act. That is all it is. We're not going to we're not trying to hijack things. Okay, we did try to hijack with the Braveheart's going to kill you, but at least we did it within your at least we did it within your match, and was not those generic like CM Punk chants that when CM Punk was retired or anything. We weren't. But but we could say that about like there are workers all over the country I can say the same thing about. And I'm not saying this to like put shade on any, yes. And I'm not saying this to put shade on anyone or anyone's booking, because like Lord knows there are only so many spots per card, per company, etc., etc., etc. So I will qualify this like not to make it sound like I'm trying to start any sort of trouble like between you and SCW Pro, or like cause some cognitive dissonance of like, yeah, I should be the world champ, or like, I'm not saying anything like that. I definitely want to frame more along the lines of like, you've always kind of just like been attached to somebody within the stories, like. I don't want to say when are you going to be your own man, because like again, I use the nudity for the example. Like they're still part of, they've always been a part of the well, not always, but they've been a part of the New Day for a decade now, but they've still managed to go, each of the, well, two of the three have gone on to win, the world championship, King of the Ring, etc., 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 while still having the New Day identity. But yeah, so definitely didn't mean this as a way to like start anything or be like, well, why aren't you doing more, or anything like that.
No, I got you. I didn't interpret.
Okay.
I didn't interpret it that way, but I mean, I answered honestly and genuinely.
Yeah.
Like that's. I very much. I hear what you're saying, and I felt that way. And again, if this were 6 months ago, maybe you would have gotten a juicier, bitter, emotional answer that I would have had to ask you to go back and edit out, right? But I came to the realization, it's like, well, what is the most important thing to me right now that's reasonable, rational, and pragmatic? And like I said, I had a direct face-to-face talk with the people in charge. And like I said, my exact wording was, if you don't see me as a featured performer here, that's fine. But I do still need singles matches. I need those reps. I really do. And if you could just mix those in, I would be grateful. And, because they're adults, I'm adults, and we talked in reasonable, rational ways, right? Not, again, I'm not a overly emotional 20-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, or, some 19-year-old hotshot who thinks if I don't get my way, that means you're doing something wrong. You're a bad person if you're not giving me what I want the way I want it. That's not me. I am too old, or maybe I'm not too old for that, but I don't think that way in that context, right? So we came to a mutual understanding, and they've been very good to me since we had that talk. I mean, I have no complaints, and in fact, it's made me be more enthusiastic about my work in The Chosen. Right. And kind of be like, cool, I get to have my storyline stuff here. Right. I'm part of this story, but then I'm still getting what I want. And it's called compromise and healthy and reasonable. And you're not going to do anything in life in this world if you're not willing to compromise. And it's turned out to be a win-win for everybody, I feel, genuinely. And if I'm coming across like I'm glad-handing and bullshitting, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, just because you may be glad handing, but that doesn't mean it's not true per se. Like, okay, I mean, just because you're kissing butt doesn't necessarily mean like you're lying or anything of the like. I don't know. It's not to even apply it. You're trying to make brownie points or whatever. Because like I say stupid stuff all the time, and they keep letting me show up and let you guys have on the shows. So I don't know. But okay, so yeah, I didn't mean to necessarily start anything with the last question, but I asked this question to start stuff with all the SCW Pro guys, because this is how I like to end things before I let you get your plugs at the end. But bearing in mind that I'm 40, out of shape, no wrestling training, so no titles under my belt, who in the SCW Pro locker room do you think I could take in a match?
Well, it's a work, so anybody. I mean, it's professional wrestling. We're entertainers. We're not actually athletes, right? We have to be in good physical shape, but we're entertainers. We're performers, right? So in a stage predetermined performance, you could beat anybody.
I am going to take this. I am going to cut it, and now I'm going to say that Augustus Draven says I can take out the one called Manders. Mark that down right now. At 123.26.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, Steve's all about business, right? Steve's about business, so you make sure that the pay is right. You got his trans taken care of, right? Like,
yeah, grease the right hands for that.
Just make it make sense. That's all.
There we go. That's why I think JT Energy had like the actual best answer, because he sat there and went like, okay, this is the information you gave me. Here's how we're rocking the story. Like, here's how it's going to go down too. Like, it's not just like, oh, you're going to beat. He used Jared Thumb, but this is how you're going to do it, because his character does this, and therefore he's not going to expect it if you do this. You're a bad guy, right? Well, like, obviously I'm a podcaster. I'm a bad guy. I'm the worst guy imaginable. I'm a gutter slime. So you got to do like, gave me the whole like Eddie Guerrero list of like underhanded tactics I needed to do just to beat Jared Thumb. But No, it was like all in fun. I just like to see like what answers like come out of things, and then just one day, like once everybody like has come a full circle of who I can beat, like everyone's just gonna like gang beat me on a random secret SCW Pro show. It's just the entire point of the show is just to beat me up because I've run my mouth finally too much. But anyway, so fantasy bookings aside, where can we find you online and get merch, follow you, and where are you going to be in the next few weeks?
So I'm on social media. I'm at Augustus Draven on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Twitter, and TikTok. And then I have a Pro Wrestling Tees store. So PWTs, just search Augustus Draven, right? Or go to the store and in the search bar, look up Augustus Draven. And then my next booking right now is for the Prestige Rumble. So I believe that's the first Saturday in January, if my memory serves me correct. And that is what I have going on. If people want to find, I think my character presentation lends itself, I think, best to Instagram. Like if you go and you look at kind of Instagram and just check out my profile, just kind of scroll down, you'll get a vibe. I think the vibe of my character comes through there, I think the best. But I'm on all the pertinent social medias at Augustus Draven on all of them.
So you heard the man. You know where to go follow him now. And he said, I agree. A lot of your presentation is very much visual. And again, like that's how, in addition to watching SCW Pro, like that's kind of like where like I kind of like sunk into my teeth a little bit more into what Augustus Draven is via the visuals. But that being said, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for chatting it up for, oh goodness, it's almost an hour and a half at this point, and I told you it was going to be like an hour. But I really appreciate you coming on, talking about your career and, pro wrestling fandom and all that sort of good stuff.
Oh, hey, happy and grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. This was a good time. Yeah, it flowed by, right? Like I wasn't on a hard out. You weren't keeping me. I'm not upset that it went long. This was fun. This is how it's supposed to be, right? Two people with a mutual love of wrestling. Time kind of just goes by quick. Time flies when you're having fun, and this was fun. Thank you.
MLW Confusion is a weekly podcast that is written and performed by Rob Kammer and hosted by Spotify for podcasters. MLW Confusion is part of the Urban Wrestling Network, and you can check them out and check out the Major League Pod on YouTube at Urban Wrestling NW. The background music for this section is Ruined by Day, performed by Alan Schroeder. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to support, please like, subscribe, and tell your friends, family, and enemies. Leaving a review is also helpful. Word of mouth with advertisement is very important for small podcasts such as this. Social media links can be found in the description, but Twitter and Instagram are at the Nova of Cass, TheNovaofCass, and Facebook is at MLW Confusion, all one word. If you'd like to support monetarily and help upgrade my equipment, please check out my virtual chip jar at ko-fi.com/Casanova. Or if you prefer more bang for your buck, you can go to patreon.com/Casanova, CASSONOVA, whereas for as little as $2, backers get access to the podcast early and without those pesky ads, plus other exclusive content. So join the crew that is headed up by Keith Wynn, Alan Schroeder, Alex McCarthy, and Elenia, and check it out. You can also find t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other merch at the Confusion Podcast on Teespring. Also, be sure to check out the description to find some affiliate links for, well, WWE merch, coffee machines, ice makers, and much more. For business inquiries such as ads and sponsorships, please email rzkammer, that's Kamerer, at comcast.net. Thank you for listening.